You usually hear about the afterlife framed as, well, this grand overarching scale of justice, right? Like you live a generally good life, you go up.
Right, an aggregate score of your entire existence.
Exactly. You live a bad life, you go down. But imagine a universe where the rules are just so intensely hyper-specific,
Hmm.
and so incredibly rigid that the literal split second before you die, just that immediate final flash of consciousness, is the single switch determining your entire eternity.
Just that 1 millisecond.
Yeah. Like if you hold a noble thought in that exact millisecond, boom, you wake up as a celestial being. But if you panic
Yeah.
or you have some base reaction, you literally wake up in your next life as a pig.
And then, a layer on top of that, a reality where life isn't just biological. I mean, we are talking about a framework where consciousness inherently exists inside a solid piece of stone, or
Wow.
within a roaring fire, or even trapped in the ice of a frozen world.
And that is the exact landscape we are mapping out today. We are taking a deep dive into a really highly specific, intricate cosmology. It's laid out in a pair of philosophical and spiritual works by Feng, written between 2005 and 2020.
Right. Specifically excerpts from the prologue and the Psalm of Life.
Yes. And to be absolutely clear up front, our mission here isn't to endorse these spiritual concepts as absolute fact. We're impartially exploring this as a really fascinating intellectual architecture.
Just seeing how it all fits together.
Right. We want to see how this universe is built, rule by rule, and, what it actually demands of the people living inside it.
Because it demands an incredible amount of precision, honestly. To even begin navigating this cosmic map, we kind of have to start with how Feng fundamentally defines existence. Like, what does it actually mean to be alive in this specific framework?
Well, the distinction made right away is profound.
Hmm.
And it actually relies on, of all things, a typographical difference.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite parts.
There is this massive divide established between the word life, written in all capital letters, and the word life written with just a capital L in lowercase letters.
That simple capitalization changes the entire scale of the concept. So, life, in all caps, is defined as a non-material structure with spiritual sense.
Okay.
The architecture uses a very specific mathematical equation to explain it. It says 1 + 1 = 1.
Right, which sounds like a riddle at first.
It does, but it means the intangible spiritual entity, meaning, your thought, your consciousness, your soul, plus the tangible flesh body equals one life.
I am so stuck on that phrase, though.
Yeah.
Non-material structure with spiritual sense. Because, like, when we think of a soul, we usually picture a ghostly human shape.
Like a spirit floating around, yeah.
Exactly. But in this framework, that all caps life isn't limited to humans or animals. Lives are everywhere. The text says they exist in the deep blue sea, in the frozen world, in fire.
Yes, fire is explicitly mentioned.
So according to this 1 + 1 = 1 equation, a roaring fire has a tangible body, the heat and the flames, plus a non-material spiritual structure.
Exactly. Which brings us to life with just a capital L. That is defined simply as the journey of that all caps life in this specific world.
Got it.
And Feng uses a really compelling metaphor for this lowercase l journey. It is described as a traveler being issued a single-entry visa with highly specific traveling dates.
I love that analogy. You get your stamped dates, you cross the border into this physical realm, and that is the exact window of time you have.
Right, no extensions.
There is no extending the trip. And to navigate that trip, there's another analogy here, comparing the physical body to a car and the spiritual entity to the driver.
The driver being the all caps life.
Yeah. The car is just the temporary chassis you rent at the airport, and the driver is the soul steering it around.
Yeah.
But I want to push back on this framework for a second.
Oh, let's hear the pushback.
Because cosmologies that separate the body and the soul so drastically, they often fall into a really specific trap, right?
Like, if my physical body is just a disposable rental car, and my entire human existence is just a temporary vacation on a single-entry visa, it sort of implies the physical world doesn't actually matter.
I see what you mean.
It paints this reality as just, I don't know, a meaningless waiting room until the visa expires and the quote-unquote real spiritual journey continues.
It is a super common conclusion to draw, honestly. But looking closely at the architecture of this universe in the text, the physical world absolutely does matter.
Okay, how so?
Both the material world and the non-material world are the necessary required spaces for life's activities. Think about it this way. The physical world is the required track for the car to drive on.
Oh, I like that. The track.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, the car is a temporary carrier. But without that highly tangible carrier and that physical track, the non-material spiritual entity has absolutely no friction.
Right, it's just spinning its wheels in the void.
Exactly. You wouldn't be able to experience this specific journey to learn or to change its structure. The physical realm is the crucible where the spiritual entity actually does its work. So the track is necessary to run the race, even if you eventually, leave the stadium.
That's a great way to put it.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
But if we have all these drivers, these lives, how do their specific vehicles actually get manufactured? Because the origin story of biological life here is, well, it's highly categorized.
Very categorized. There are 4 hyper-specific methods of birth in this universe. Lives are born either from eggs, from wombs, from changes of humidity, or by transformation and separation.
Humidity births. That is so specific.
It is, and the underlying unshakable rule governing all 4 of these methods is that they have all been created.
So every single ancestor was created, their biological and spiritual programs were set, and all of their offspring basically run on that exact pre-installed cosmic software.
That's the baseline, yes.
But this is where I get completely derailed by this cosmology, because there is a massive, brutal divergence in how these programs operate, based purely on how a being is born.
You're talking about the permanent deletion aspect.
Yes. Okay, so the egg and womb birth are placed in one category, right? They reproduce naturally, based on temperature and humidity. When they die, their physical bodies return to dust.
The rental car breaks down.
Exactly. But their spiritual entities, that all caps life, never die. They simply exit the rental car and move on to their next journey.
Right. They might go to heaven, return to the mortal world, reincarnate as an animal, or, fall into hell. They possess an eternal soul.
But then look at the other half of the births. Beings born from humidity or transformation. And the specific examples given in the text are plants and parasitic lice on human bodies.
Which is such a vivid example.
It is. These beings appear automatically in massive numbers. But when they die, the text says they perish thoroughly.
Early.
They have no eternal soul journey, no reincarnation. They are just gone. And honestly, this feels like a fundamental contradiction.
How so?
Well, why would environmental dependence, like a louse, needing the humidity of a human scalp to survive, equate to a soul that gets permanently deleted from the universe, while a chicken born from an egg gets an eternal, ever-reincarnating spirit?
It's a fair question. But in this text, it comes down to the fundamental complexity of the program they were given upon creation. It is not so much a punishment for the louse, but a reality of its structure.
Okay.
The humidity-born lives are entirely reactive to their localized environment. When their environments change, they go extinct quickly. In this framework, they simply do not possess the complex, independent, non-material structure required to sustain an eternal spiritual entity.
So they're basically simple machines.
Exactly. Think of them as biological machines running a very simple, localized script. Womb and egg-born beings are running a profoundly more complex operating system, one that's capable of spiritual carryover.
Okay, so they essentially lack the hard drive space to save their progress, so they just wipe completely when the power goes out.
That is a perfect modern way to describe it.
That is a ruthless cosmic reality. And it inherently establishes that since some beings perish entirely, like the parasitic lice, and others live forever, there is the very strict ranking system governing everything around us.
Oh, the hierarchy is absolute. The text outlines 3 distinct tiers: low-level, intermediate-level, and high-level lives. And this ladder encompasses absolutely everything in existence.
It's a huge ladder.
It is. At the bottom, you have microbes, plants, and animals. Then it moves up to ghosts, monsters, goblins, and devils.
Goblins and devils above animals.
Got it. Yes. Higher still are gods, Buddhas, celestials, and saints. Above them are mysterious cosmic objects. And ultimately, sitting at the very peak of this entire structure is the ancestor of Buddha, referred to as the greatest creator.
Okay, but what governs where a being sits on that ladder is what I find most fascinating. It is this law of inverse proportions.
Right.
The lower the level of a life, the greater its sheer quantity in the universe. Low-level lives are highly tangible. They have very small energy, and their forms are incredibly rigid and uneasy to change.
And as you move up the ladder to higher level lives, the quantity decreases dramatically. They become less tangible until they are completely invisible.
Which is wild to think about.
Yeah, and they possess immense energy. Because of that immense energy, they are no longer rigid. They're able to change their forms at will.
Reading that law of inverse proportions instantly made me think of basic physics.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, it perfectly maps onto the states of matter. Think about a solid block of ice, right? It is highly tangible. You can hold it in your hand. It has very low energy, and its shape is entirely rigid. It is incredibly uneasy to change.
Right. It just sits there.
Exactly. That is your low-level life.
Yeah.
But if you apply immense energy to that ice, if you boil it, it becomes steam, becomes invisible, takes up way less concentrated quantity, but it is highly expansive, and it adapts its form instantly to whatever room you put it in.
It's no longer bound by that rigid shape.
Yeah. Adding energy elevates it from a tangible, rigid block to an invisible, adaptable force.
Honestly, that is perhaps the best way to visualize Shuefeng's spiritual hierarchy. The more spiritual energy a life accumulates through its journeys, the less bound it is by rigid physical tangibility.
It sublimates.
Exactly. It literally sublimates into a higher cosmic sphere.
So with this vast ladder mapped out, from the highly tangible, low-energy parasitic lice at the very bottom, all the way up to the invisible, high-energy greatest creator at the top, where exactly do you and I sit?
Humans represent the intersection. We are the intermediate lives. We are tangible, but we sit right on the precipice of this sublimation process.
But we can go either way.
Exactly. Human life structures are not static. They can change direction. And those changes are dictated by one primary metric. It's whether we are careful or careless in our existence.
And the warning here is incredibly stark. By being careless, human life structures degrade down the ladder to animals. The text specifically names dogs and pigs.
Yes.
But by being careful, those exact same human structures can elevate up the ladder to goblins, spirits, celestials, or Buddhas.
And we are given a very clear definition of what carelessness actually looks like in this framework. Chasing money, power, status, reputation, and beauty is the ultimate carelessness.
Basically, the entire modern human experience.
Pretty much. Engaging in those pursuits actively prevents a person from unsealing their spiritual perception. And without unsealing that perception, you remain ignorant and confused forever, locked in a rigid, low-energy state.
I'm sure that hits home for you listening right now, because think about your daily life. Everything in our society is fundamentally built around chasing money, status, or beauty.
It's all we're taught to care about.
Right. And this framework is arguing that the very things we are conditioned to pursue are actively cementing us to the bottom of the cosmic ladder.
There is incredible tension in this. The cosmology literally states, human lives are not easy to attain and their survival is hard.
It really frames the human experience as this precarious, high-stakes balancing act, where you're constantly fighting the gravity of your own earthly desires.
It requires an immense amount of discipline just to maintain your footing as an intermediate life, let alone elevate.
I also want to highlight something here that might catch a lot of Western listeners completely off guard.
The goblins.
Yes. Elevating from a human into a goblin is listed as a step up.
Right.
Because, like in a lot of Western folklore, goblins are pests, or they're low-level monsters you fight in a fantasy video game. But in this specific cosmology, a goblin is a higher energy, less rigid, more invisible being than a human. It is a promotion.
It really is. It forces you to step outside your cultural preconceptions.
Yeah.
You have to view elevation strictly through that physics analogy we talked about, energy over tangibility.
Right. It strips away the moral aesthetics we usually apply to words like goblin or monster.
Exactly, and replaces them with structural, energetic definitions. But that precarious, high-stakes balancing act of being human leads us to the most intense, unforgiving mechanism in this entire framework.
Oh man, the final exam.
The final exam.
If human life is this constant test of careful elevation versus careless degradation, when does the universe actually calculate your final grade?
Well, the mechanics of reincarnation here do not rely on a gentle weighing of your life's overall deeds. There is no scale measuring your good years against your bad years.
Which is terrifying.
It really is. It relies entirely on the exact moment of your death.
Humans change every day based on their consciousness.
Yeah.
But what you eventually transform into, your next single-entry visa, depends strictly on the state of your immediate pre-death consciousness.
The text is very clear. If you possess a celestial's consciousness in that exact moment, you will go to the fairyland world.
Right.
If you hold a human consciousness, you return to the human world. And if you hold an animal's consciousness, you will fall to the animal world.
This concept carries an immense amount of pressure. Like, think about your drive to work this morning. You could live your entire 80-year life being perfectly careful, avoiding the traps of money and status, successfully unsealing your spiritual perception.
Doing everything right.
Right. But if a truck swerves into your lane, and in the literal split second before your brain shuts off, you panic, or you have a base, survival-driven, angry thought at the driver, you fall to the animal world
Just like that.
because of 1 millisecond of mundane frustration.
Y-
That's it.
It is a terrifying prospect. It completely isolates the immediate pre-death state as the ultimate overriding checkpoint. But, if you connect this to the bigger picture Su Feng is painting, it explains the absolute urgency of the cosmology.
How so?
It is why the exploration of life's mysteries must be ranked as your absolute highest priority.
Ah, I see. You are essentially training your brain for a final pop quiz that you have no idea when you will take.
Exactly. You have to study the nature of life so intensely that a celestial consciousness becomes your default unconscious reflex,
Wow.
so that even in the sudden, violent moment of a car crash, you don't slip into an animalistic panic. Your reflex has to be profound spiritual calm.
It strips away the idea of just being a quote-unquote good person in the moral sense. It becomes about achieving a structural, energetic discipline of your consciousness.
Right, so that it flawlessly holds its shape when the physical rental car violently breaks down.
That is incredibly mechanical. Up to this point, the framework from the 2020 prologue feels like reading a cosmic legal document. It is equations, single-entry visas, strict inverse laws, and these unforgiving checkpoints.
It's very rigorous.
But the other piece we were looking at today, the Psalm of Life, written 15 years earlier in 2005, it shifts the tone entirely. It reveals how the author actually feels about this universe.
The shift is jarring in the best way possible. It moves from systematic, rigid philosophy to profound, poetic reverence.
Yeah.
Exploring life is no longer just a mandate to avoid becoming a pig. It is deemed the most lofty and greatest thing an intellect can undertake.
The metaphors in that text are just beautiful. It stops talking at 1 + 1 = 1, and it starts describing life as a stream running from snow-capped mountains down to the cerulean ocean.
It calls life an ivy vine unfolding its green leaves and branching across cliffs and precipices.
It says it's an endless cave full of strange rocks and a narrow, meandering footpath bypassing brambles.
It paints a picture of something that is resilient, incredibly adaptable, and constantly seeking connection and expansion through the physical world.
But the metaphor that really stopped me in my tracks was this line. It says, life is a rainbow of flowing light, burning itself fiercely and fully, decorating the firmament, and finally mixing itself into other objects in forms of energy.
It is a striking image.
It is, and it beautifully ties everything back to that physics analogy we talked about earlier.
The steam analogy.
Exactly. The idea of a rainbow burning itself fiercely and becoming invisible energy perfectly mirrors the strict mechanical rule that higher-level beings possess immense energy, become invisible, and mix with the cosmos.
It really does.
It takes the terrifying, rigid law of the cosmic hierarchy and turns it into a poem. The goal isn't just to survive the pre-death checkpoint. The goal is to become the rainbow, to burn off your tangibility and mix into the energy of the universe.
The rigid rules of the hierarchy and the poetic reverence for existence are fundamentally telling the exact same story. Whether life is trapped in a stone, crawling as a louse, or sublimating as a celestial, it is all a constant, beautiful process of energy transformation.
It is such an intense framework to wrap your head around. The stakes are as high as they can possibly get. I mean, we started with that foundational equation, the intangible soul plus the tangible body equaling one life.
And we explored the reality that your physical existence is just a rental car on a single entry visa.
We mapped the vast ladder of the universe from humidity-born lice running localized scripts that perish entirely, up through the precarious intersection of humanity.
Right up to the high-energy, invisible beings shifting forms at the very top.
And we confronted the terrifying reality of that ultimate checkpoint. The immediate pre-death consciousness that dictates your entire cosmic trajectory in a fraction of a second.
It is a cosmology that demands absolute attention.
It really does. But before we wrap up today, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought. There is a dangling thread in this source material that we haven't touched on yet.
Oh, I know exactly what you're going to bring out.
The framework explicitly states that there are 8 mysteries on life, and it mandates that those who have successfully unsealed their spiritual perception need to explore and seek out these 8 mysteries.
It's a massive call to action for the careful human.
But the catch is, the text we've been provided never actually lists what those 8 mysteries are. They are entirely unwritten in these excerpts.
A total mystery in themselves.
Exactly. So I want to pose this directly to you listening. Based on everything we've just unpacked today, From the sentience of stones and roaring fires, to the physics of energy overriding tangibility, to the strict, unforgiving reflex of pre-death consciousness.
If you had to guess what the first of those 8 unwritten mysteries might be,
What would you even begin to look for?
that's an incredible question to carry with you today.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and we will catch you next time.